The rain wasn't just falling, it was a solid wall of water, hammering the pavement of a city that had forgotten how to be kind. I was drenched, clinging to the last bus transfer in my pocket when I saw her, a little girl, maybe 6, sobbing under a shattered awning. Without a second thought, I handed her my umbrella. It was a simple gesture. I had no idea her grandfather was watching from a limousine across the street, or that he was the richest man in the country. My name is Clara. I was a barista, living paycheck to paycheck in a tiny apartment that smelled of old coffee and damp concrete. That moment in the storm was just another day trying to be a decent person in an indifferent city. I never looked for the limousine. I never asked for a reward. But that single act of instinctive kindness was about to unravel a hidden lineage and thrust me into a world of unimaginable wealth and guarded secrets. This is the true story of how a $5 umbrella connected me to a billionaire, and why that connection became the most dangerous thing in my life. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Life returned to its normal grinding rhythm. The 6 a.m. alarm, the stale smell of the bus, the endless line of customers at the coffee shop where I worked, each one looking through me like I was part of the furniture. My life was a spreadsheet of negative numbers. Rent, due on the 1st. Student loans, a ghost from a degree that never materialized into a career. The medical bill from when I slipped on the wet shop floor last winter. I was 24, and my most valuable possession was a Metro card with $11.40 left on it. The umbrella was a loss I felt. It was a good one, a sturdy black canopy I'd splurged on after my last cheap one inverted in a gust. Letting it go meant walking 12 blocks to my apartment in the next downpour, getting soaked to the skin. But you don't ask a sobbing child for your umbrella back. You just don't. I told myself it was karma. Maybe the universe would notice. The universe, it turned out, was watching through a tinted window. The first sign wasn't a call or a letter. It was a package. It appeared outside my apartment door on a Tuesday morning, a plain cardboard box with no return address. My name was written on the label in crisp, elegant handwriting. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a new umbrella, not just any umbrella. This was a compact, automatic one with a polished wooden handle, the fabric thick and water-repellent. It looked expensive. It felt expensive. A small, embossed card rested on top. 2 words, "Thank you." I stood in my hallway, cold creeping up my spine. Who sends a thank you gift for an umbrella? And how did they know where I lived? A paranoid thought. Had the little girl's family followed me home? The idea seemed ludicrous, straight out of a movie. I used the umbrella the next day, guiltily aware of its quality compared to the broken ones clutched by people at the bus stop. It was the first thread. The second thread came the following week. I was fired from the coffee shop, not for anything I did, but because the franchise was being sold. "Last in, first out," my manager said with a shrug, handing me my final check, which wasn't enough to cover next month's rent. The panic was a familiar, metallic taste in my mouth. I spent 3 days filling out applications online, my hopes shrinking with every automated rejection email. On the 4th day, a different envelope arrived. Thick, cream-colored paper. The logo in the corner was for a law firm called Sterling, Vale & Clark. My hands shook as I opened it. It was a letter, formal and precise. It stated that a client of the firm who wished to remain anonymous had been made aware of my recent employment termination and wished to provide bridge funding to alleviate immediate financial strain. Enclosed was a cashier's check. The amount was $5,000. I nearly dropped it. $5,000 was more than I made in 2 months. It was rent, it was groceries, it was breathing room. It was also terrifying. This wasn't a replacement umbrella anymore. This was life-changing money, arriving with surgical timing. The letter emphasized there were no strings attached, no requirement for repayment. It was a gift in recognition of a previous kindness. I called the law firm. A receptionist with a voice like polished glass confirmed the letter was legitimate. She could not, under any circumstances, reveal the client's identity. She could only state that the funds were mine to use as I saw fit. I cashed the check. What else could I do? Pride is a luxury for people with savings accounts. For a month, I lived in a state of nervous suspension. The money was a cushion, but the mystery was a weight. I felt watched. A black sedan seemed to linger too long on my street. My phone, a cheap prepaid thing, would sometimes have full signal in areas where it usually dropped calls. I started looking over my shoulder. Then the driver appeared. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was walking home from a futile interview at a copy shop. A long, silver car, so sleek and silent it seemed to glide, pulled up beside me. The rear window descended, not to reveal a little girl but a man in a tailored suit. He was in his 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and silver hair. "Clara," he said. His voice was calm, measured. I stopped, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Who are you?" "My name is Arthur Vale, of Sterling, Vale and Clark, the lawyer from the letter, in the flesh. I represent the family of the child you assisted in the rainstorm. My client would like to meet you, to thank you in person." "The grandfather," I whispered. "The richest man in the country. A name everyone knew, Alastair Thorne. A reclusive billionaire who built an empire in tech and shipping. A man whose face was rarely seen in newspapers but whose influence was woven into the fabric of everything." Arthur Vale gave a single, slight nod. "Mr. Thorne is a very private man. This is an extraordinary invitation. He requests your discretion and your presence for dinner this evening. The car will take you." This was the precipice. Everything in my life had been small, predictable, and hard. Now a door was being held open to a world of unimaginable scale. The warning from the original story echoed in my mind, adapted to this new reality. Anyone who gets close to a fortune like that either ends up working for it, bound to it, or destroyed by it. There is no in-between. I looked at the open car door, a portal to a different life. I thought of the $5,000 that saved me, of the little girl's tears in the rain. Was this gratitude, or was it the first step into a gilded cage? I took a breath and I got in the car. The car didn't take me to a restaurant. It slid through the city, past the neighborhoods I knew, into districts where the buildings grew taller and the streets quieter. We passed through a wrought iron gate that opened silently, climbing a winding driveway through what could only be called a private park. At the crest of the hill stood the house. It wasn't a mansion in the gaudy sense. It was a fortress of glass and steel, all sharp angles and cold light, hovering above the city like a spaceship that had decided to land. Arthur Vale didn't speak during the ride. When we stopped, he simply said, "They're waiting for you in the atrium." A man in a dark suit opened my door. The air up here was different, crisp, scented with pine from the surrounding trees. I followed a path of floating stone steps to a vast, transparent door which vanished into the wall as I approached. Inside was a cavernous space, 2 stories high, filled with living greenery and the soft sound of falling water. The entire far wall was a window, a panoramic view of the city's glittering grid far below. And there, standing before that window, was Alastair Thorne. He was taller than he looked in the rare photograph. In his late 70s but straight-backed, with a full head of white hair and eyes the color of winter sky. He wore a simple navy sweater and trousers. He didn't smile, but his expression wasn't unkind. It was assessing. "Clara," he said. His voice was softer than I expected, but it carried in the silent room. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Thorne," I managed, my own voice sounding small. "Thank you for the umbrella and the check." He waved a hand, dismissing the gratitude as if it were a minor accounting error. "A token, please sit." He gestured to a low sofa shaped like a sculptured cloud. He took a chair opposite me. Between us was a low table holding a pot of tea and 2 cups. He poured, his movements precise. "The child you helped is my granddaughter, Lily. She was in the city with her nanny for a piano lesson. The nanny was detained. A family emergency she failed to report. Lily slipped away in the confusion. She was lost and terrified for 47 minutes. He paused, letting the number hang in the air. 47 minutes of a billionaire's heir, missing in a storm. I could only imagine the panic behind these calm walls. "You found her," he continued. "You comforted her. You gave her your shelter without knowing who she was. That is a disappearing quality." He sipped his tea. "I have spent a lifetime surrounded by people who want something. You acted without wanting anything." It was noted. I shifted, uncomfortable under the weight of his scrutiny. Anyone would have done it. "That," he said with the faintest hint of a smile, "is demonstrably false. Several people passed her by. Security footage confirms it." He had footage. Of course he did. He had probably reviewed it frame by frame. "Lily hasn't stopped talking about you," he said, and his tone shifted, warming by a single degree. "The kind lady with the black umbrella. She asked if we could invite you for tea. So here we are." As if on cue, a side door opened. A woman in a crisp uniform entered, holding the hand of the little girl from the storm. Lily. She was dressed in a velvet pinafore, her hair in neat braids. When she saw me, her face lit up. She broke free and ran across the vast room, stopping just short of me. "Hello again," I said softly, smiling. She didn't speak, just beamed and reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small, laminated drawing. It was a crayon picture of two stick figures under a big, black umbrella with yellow lines for rain. She held it out to me. I took it, my throat tightening. "It's beautiful, thank you, Lily." "She's selective mutism," Thorne said, his voice gentle now, entirely focused on his granddaughter. "She speaks freely at home with family, but in unfamiliar situations or under stress, she freezes. The storm was a perfect storm, so to speak." He watched her lean against my knee, a look of profound, quiet satisfaction on his face. "You were an island of calm for her. She trusts you." The evening unfolded in a surreal bubble. We had tea. Lily showed me more drawings. Thorne asked me questions, not interrogations, but genuine inquiries. About my parents gone, my studies unfinished, my life a struggle. He listened with a frightening intensity. I felt like a specimen under a microscope, but a valued one. When it was time to leave, Thorne walked me to the door himself. "I would like to see you again, Clara. Lily would benefit from your company. A weekly visit, perhaps. An outing to the park, a museum. Your time would, of course, be compensated generously." This was the offer. Not a job, but a role, companion, friend for hire. The money would solve every practical problem I had, but the strings were invisible and all the more powerful for it. I'd have to think about it," I said. "Of course," he replied, as if he already knew my answer. "Arthur Vale will be in touch." The silver car returned me to my apartment. The contrast was physical, a punch of damp air and sirens after the rarefied silence of the hill. In my pocket was the laminated drawing. In my bank account was his money. In my head was his offer. I said yes. A week later, Arthur Vale delivered a contract. It was for a personal liaison and companionship role. The salary was 5 times what I'd ever earned. There were confidentiality clauses, non-disclosure agreements, codes of conduct. It stipulated 1 guaranteed afternoon per week with Lily, with flexibility for additional time as requested. A dedicated driver was provided. All expenses covered. I signed. What was the alternative? Returning to the soul-crushing scramble of minimum wage. This was a lifeline, and I grabbed it. The first few outings were magical. Lily and I, with a discreet driver waiting nearby, would go to the aquarium, the botanical gardens, the children's science museum. She began to whisper to me, her voice a tiny, clear bell. She loved dolphins, hated the smell of the bug house, thought the planetarium was boring. She was a bright, funny, deeply sensitive child living in a sterile, high-security world. Her friendship felt real, untainted by the money. But I was naive. The money was the tide, and it was coming in. First, it was the apartment. Arthur Vale called. "Mr. Thorne is concerned about the security of your current residence. For your safety, and for the continuity of your arrangement with Lily, we've secured a lease on a more suitable property. The move will be handled for you." They moved me. Not to another cramped studio, but to a sleek, modern one-bedroom in a dormant building with a gym and a rooftop garden. My rent was paid for a year. My old furniture was replaced. My clothes, Arthur Vale suggested gently, might not be appropriate for some of the family venues I might now attend. A personal stylist was scheduled. I protested, but it was framed as necessity, not luxury. For the role, Vale said. I was being upgraded, remodeled to fit into their world. I met the rest of the family piece by piece. Not at the glass house, but at Thorne's older, more traditional estate in the country for a weekend, so Lily can play on the lawn. I met Alina, Thorne's daughter and Lily's mother. She was in her 40s, beautiful in a sharp, brittle way. She wore a constant, faint smile that never reached her eyes. She thanked me for being such a help with Lily, but her gaze was cold, calculating. I was a variable in her equation. And I met Robert, Alina's brother, Thorne's son. He was the opposite of his sister, louder, boisterous, with a patina of charm over something harder. He shook my hand too firmly. "So you're the Good Samaritan," he said, his eyes scanning me up and down. "Dad's new pet project. Cute." The comment stung, but it also illuminated the landscape. I wasn't just Clara to them. I was a symbol of their father's whimsy, a living reproach perhaps, or a potential pawn. The real pivot came 2 months in. Lily had a bad dream after a movie. She called for me on the nanny's phone, crying. I was across the city, but the driver had me at the glass house in 20 minutes. I calmed her, read her a story until she fell asleep. As I was leaving, Thorne was in his study, the door ajar. He saw me and beckoned me in. The room was all dark wood and shelves of antique books. He was holding a small, framed photograph. "My wife Genevieve," he said, showing me the picture of a woman with a radiant, warm smile. "She died 10 years ago, ovarian cancer. She was the heart of this family. After she was gone," he trailed off, placing the photo back on the desk with exquisite care. "The heart went out of things. Lily is the closest thing to it that remains. You have a touch of Genevieve's kindness. It's why Lily responds to you." He looked at me, and for the first time I saw not a billionaire, but a lonely old man clinging to echoes. "I would like you to be more present in our lives, Clara, not just as Lily's friend. As part of the household, we have a guest suite. You could pursue your studies again. We would support you." It was the gilded cage, its door swinging wide open. A life of curated luxury in exchange for my independence, my identity. To become a permanent professional friend, a living memorial to a dead woman's kindness. Before I could answer, Robert Thorne appeared in the doorway, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He'd overheard. "Moving her in now, Dad," he said, his voice slurred just enough. "That's fast. What's the play? You writing her into the will next?" The air in the room froze. Thorne's face turned to stone. "That's enough, Robert." Robert's eyes, bloodshot and angry, locked onto me. "Better watch your back, Clara. In this family, kindness is a currency, and nobody gets a handout without paying for it, one way or another." He left, leaving a silence thick with threat. Thorne sighed, a sound of deep weariness. Pay no attention to him. He's protective of the family's interests. But the warning was now a living thing in the room with us. The stakes had just snapped into sharp, terrifying focus. This wasn't a fairy tale. It was a chess game played with lives, and I had just been placed squarely on the board. I was no longer just the help. To Robert, I was a threat. To Thorne, I was a replacement for something lost. And to myself, I was suddenly a woman in way over her head, standing in a billionaire's study, realizing the storm I'd stepped into was just beginning. I didn't move into the glass house. Not then. I used the excuse of needing to finish a community college semester I'd hastily re-enrolled in, a flimsy shield against Thorne's offer. He accepted it with a nod, but the pressure didn't lift. It just changed shape. Robert's drunken warning became a silent campaign. A week after the study incident, my new apartment building had a security review. Men in suits, not the building staff, questioned my neighbors about comings and goings. My friend Sarah, who visited once, later told me a black SUV followed her home. When I confronted Arthur Vale, he was apologetic but firm. Mr. Thorne's security protocols are comprehensive. Your association with the family necessitates certain precautions. For everyone's safety. I was being monitored. My world, which had expanded with wealth, was now shrinking under surveillance. The outings with Lily became my only respite. With her, the tension melted. We baked cookies in the country estate's kitchen, her hands covered in flour. We built elaborate pillow forts in the sunroom. She was opening up, her whispered sentences growing longer, her laughter more frequent. I loved her purely and simply, and that love was my vulnerability. Eleanor, Lily's mother, began to insert herself. She'd join our outings, a silent, observant shadow. One afternoon at the zoo, while Lily was enraptured by the penguins, Eleanor spoke, her eyes not on her daughter but on the city skyline. "My father collects people," she said, her voice flat. "He sees a quality he lacks or one he's lost and he acquires it. He acquired my mother for her warmth. He acquired his current head of security for his ruthlessness. He acquired you for your decency. Do not mistake it for affection. You are a living asset on his balance sheet." I stared at her. Lily's affection is real. Lily is a child. She is also an asset, the most valuable one. Eleanor finally looked at me, her gaze icy. "He is testing you, seeing if you are malleable enough, loyal enough to be made permanent. A permanent fixture is harder to remove than a temporary employee. Think carefully about what you want, Clara, because once you're in, there is no walking away, not without his permission." Her words were a different kind of threat, colder and more calculating than Robert's bluster. That night I did something reckless. I used the laptop Thorne's stipend had bought me, on a network I was sure was monitored, and I searched. Not for Alastair Thorne. His Wikipedia page was a sterile monument. I searched for Genevieve Thorne cause of death and Thorne family controversy. The official story was ovarian cancer, as he'd said, but buried in a 20-year-old society blog, now defunct but archived, was a snippet. A speculation column asking why the vibrant, philanthropic Genevieve Thorne had become a near recluse in her final 2 years. It quoted an unnamed family friend saying she was heartsick, about the business, about the things she couldn't stop. I felt a chill. What things? A week later, during a tedious finance lecture, my phone buzzed. An unknown number, a text. "Ask him about the Richest merger. Ask him who really owned the ships." Followed 30 seconds later by, "Wrong number, disregard." It was no wrong number, it was a message. And it was a trap, I knew it, but the seed was planted. Richest, I looked it up. A defunct shipping company Thorne's empire had acquired in a hostile takeover 15 years ago. The business news coverage was dry about market share and regulatory approvals. The human interest stories were darker. Protests, allegations of coerced sellouts. One small, family-owned competitor, Horizon Lines, went bankrupt 6 months after the merger. Its owner, a man named David Chen, died in a car accident a year after that. Coincidence? It had to be coincidence. This was the paranoid thinking Robert and Eleanor wanted to provoke, but the timing of the text, right after my deep dive, I was being played. By whom? Robert, Eleanor, someone else. The chess game was now three-dimensional, and I was a pawn being shoved by invisible hands. The next family dinner was a mandatory event. Thorne's birthday. I was expected. The dress delivered to my apartment was emerald green, worth more than my first car. I felt like an imposter wearing it. The dinner was in the formal dining room of the country estate. Crystal, silver, silent servants, Thorne at the head. Eleanor and her bland, financier husband on one side, Robert and a stunning, bored-looking model on the other. Lily, in a tiny version of a party dress, was at the table, wide-eyed and quiet. I was placed next to Thorne, a position of supposed honor that felt like a target on my back. The conversation was polite, deadly dull. Stock markets, art auctions, a planned trip to Dubai. Then Robert, swirling his wine, looked at me. "So Clara, Dad says you're back in school. Studying what? How to maximize a trust fund." Robert, Thorne warned, his voice low. I'm studying child psychology, I said, keeping my voice even. I want to understand developmental trauma better. The words were out before I could think, a subtle dig at their family, at Lily's mutism. The table went quiet, Eleanor's fork stilled. Robert smiled, a predator's smile. Ambitious, planning a long-term career with us then, Robert pressed. Thorne answered for me. Clara's future is bright, whatever she chooses. He placed a hand briefly over mine on the table, a gesture of possession. Robert's eyes tracked the movement, his smile vanishing. After dessert, Thorne asked to show me a new painting in his private gallery. We left the others. The gallery was a long, hushed hall. He stopped before a dark, tumultuous seascape. Turner, he said, a study in chaos and control. I gathered every ounce of courage I had. The text message burned in my mind. Mr. Thorne, can I ask you about something? The Richest merger. I was reading about your business history and it seemed controversial. He went very still, not angry, alert, like a hawk that has heard a mouse in the grass. What about it? The owner of Horizon Lines, David Chen. He died after, it just seemed sad. Thorne turned from the painting to look at me. His winter blue eyes were unreadable. David Chen was a poor businessman and a worse gambler. He took his own life after squandering his family's legacy. A tragedy, but one of his own making. Why do you ask? His answer was too smooth, too rehearsed. The suicide detail wasn't in the articles I'd seen. No reason, I mumbled. Just curious about how things work. Curiosity is good, he said, turning back to the painting. But in business and in families it must be directed. Focus on Lily, on your studies. That is where your value lies, Clara, not in old news. It was a gentle rebuke with steel beneath it. Stay in your lane. The message was clear. I returned to the city that night shaken. I had poked the bear, and while it hadn't swiped at me, it had shown me its claws. The text message, Thorne's reaction, none of it felt right. 3 days later, the driver took Lily and me to the Natural History Museum. As we watched the dinosaur skeletons, a man in a maintenance uniform approached, pushing a cart of cleaning supplies. He stopped near us, fiddling with a floor buffer. As he bent down, he slipped a folded note onto the bench beside me, then moved on without a word. My heart hammered. Lily was enthralled by a T-Rex. I palmed the note. In the bathroom stall, I opened it. It was a photograph printed on plain paper. A younger Alistair Thorne with a man I recognized as David Chen. They weren't fighting. They were shaking hands, smiling. On the back, a handwritten line. He didn't ruin him. He partnered with him. Then he buried him. Ask about the asterisk Pacific Star. The asterisk Pacific Star asterisk. I searched it on my phone, my hands trembling. A Thorne container ship. Reported lost in a storm in the South China Sea 12 years ago. All hands, 28 crew, presumed dead. Insurance payout, $120 million. A cold nausea washed over me. This wasn't just about hostile takeovers. This was about insurance fraud, possibly murder. The anonymous messenger wasn't just trying to spook me. They were handing me a weapon. But why? To use me to hurt Thorne, or to see what I would do with it? That night I couldn't sleep. The walls of my beautiful apartment felt like they were closing in. I was holding a secret that could destroy the most powerful man I knew. A man who, for all his manipulation, cared for his granddaughter. A man who, I was beginning to fear, was capable of terrible things. The choice was no longer about accepting a life of luxury. It was about survival. If I went to Thorne with a photo, I was admitting I was digging into his past, and I'd seen the warning in his eyes. If I went to the authorities, I'd need proof, and I'd paint a target on my back the size of a skyscraper. If I stayed silent, the anonymous messenger might escalate, putting me in even greater danger. I was trapped in the gilded cage, and now someone was rattling the bars, trying to provoke the beast inside. The umbrella in the rain had led me here, to a choice between two kinds of drowning. in the depths of Thorne's world or in the fallout of its destruction. The storm was no longer outside. It was in the room with me, and I had to decide which way to run before the lightning struck. I didn't run to the police. I ran to Arthur Vale. It was a calculated risk. If the lawyer was part of Thorne's darkest secrets, I was doomed. But if he was just a loyal employee, a guardian of the family's legal facade, he might be the only one who could control the fallout. I requested an urgent meeting at his office, away from the estates. When I sat across from him in his wood-paneled conference room, I placed the photograph of Thorne and David Chen on the desk between us. I didn't mention the note about the Pacific Star asterisk. I just watched his face. He picked it up, studied it, and his professional mask didn't crack, but his knuckles whitened. "Where did you get this?" "Someone slipped it to me, at the museum, with Lily." I let the implication hang there, that his security had failed, that Lily had been put near an unknown threat. "This is a private photograph from a corporate retreat," he said, his voice tight. "Its dissemination is a violation of several agreements." "It's evidence," I said quietly, "of a partnership, before the ruin, before the suicide. Someone wants me to ask questions, Arthur, and they don't care if I get hurt asking them, or if Lily gets hurt." That got to him, the mention of Lily. He set the photo down carefully as if it were explosive. "What do you want, Clara?" "I want to know what I'm standing in the middle of. I want to know if the man who pays my rent, who trusts me with his granddaughter, is a man who buries his partners. I can't protect Lily if I'm blind, and I will protect Lily." It was the only leverage I had, my genuine care for the child, my only currency in a world of billion-dollar deals. Vale leaned back, steepling his fingers. He was silent for a full minute. "The messenger," he finally said. "Did they mention a ship, the Pacific Star?" My blood ran cold. He knew. "Yes." He closed his eyes, a flash of profound weariness crossing his face. "I am bound by attorney-client privilege, but I am also bound by my duty to the firm and to the law. What I can tell you is this. There is a faction within the family holdings, a splinter group of old guard board members, who believe Mr. Thorne's succession planning is emotionally compromised. They see his attachment to you, his focus on Lily's happiness, as a vulnerability. They are attempting to destabilize his control by provoking a crisis. You are the chosen catalyst." It wasn't Robert or Alina. It was the company asterisk. The empire itself was trying to eat its king, and I was the poison. They want me to publicly accuse him, to trigger an investigation, or to simply disappear with enough suspicion to warrant board intervention and a declaration of mental incompetence. The photograph is a warning shot, to you and to him. Back away from the family, or worse evidence will find a less manageable recipient. So what do I do? My voice was a whisper. "You have a choice. You can walk away. Tonight, we would provide a settlement, a new identity, relocation far from here. You would never see Lily again, but you would be safe." The thought of abandoning Lily made my chest ache. Or you can stay. And by staying, knowing what you now know, you align yourself definitively with Mr. Thorne. You become part of his defense. It will be dangerous. The attacks will come harder. They will try to discredit you, to frame you, to prove you are a gold-digging instigator. You will need to be smarter and tougher than you have ever been. He was offering me a role again, but this time it was a soldier's role. Why would he want me to stay, knowing I know this? "Because," Vale said, a flicker of something like respect in his eyes, "you came to me. You didn't go to the press. You didn't try to blackmail him. You sought to understand the threat, to protect the child. That is the quality he values above all else. Loyalty under fire." I left his office with the photograph, my mind reeling. The cage now had a defined enemy outside its bars. The choice was no longer about comfort, but about allegiance in a war I never enlisted in. I asked the driver to take me to the glass house. Thorne was in his atrium, as if waiting. He saw my face and dismissed the staff with a wave. "You've spoken to Vale," he said. "It wasn't a question." I told him everything. The text, the museum, the photo, Vale's theory about the board. He listened, impassive, staring out at his city. When I finished, he said, "David Chen was my friend. We were partners. The Richest merger was his idea. He came to me when he was in trouble, when Horizon was failing. We structured a deal to save his company's assets, to protect his workers, but the debt he had hidden, it was catastrophic. He was ashamed. The partnership couldn't save him. The photo you have is from the day we signed the agreement that would have saved everything. He killed himself 3 weeks later." He turned to me, and for the first time I saw genuine, unguarded grief. The board faction, the old vultures, they always believed I forced him out, that I orchestrated the suicide to take the scraps. They never understood the partnership. They only understand predation. "And the Pacific Star?" I dared to ask. His gaze hardened. "A tragedy, an act of God, investigated fully. The insurance was legitimate. The whispers are a weapon, Clara, forged from a real tragedy to serve a greedy purpose. They are using you to reheat old lies." I wanted to believe him. The raw pain about Chen felt real. But the scale of the attack against him suggested his enemies believed the lies were true, or had enough truth to be dangerous. "I want to stay," I heard myself say. "I want to help for Lily." He nodded slowly. "Then you will need to become more than a companion. You will need to become family, officially." The proposal was as shocking as a gunshot. He wasn't asking me to marry him. He was proposing a legal guardianship arrangement, a formalized adoption as an adult. It would make me his ward, give me a protected legal standing within the family trust, and most critically, make any attack on me an attack on the Thorne family directly, legally, and in the eyes of the board. It would be a declaration of war, but with me inside the fortress walls. It was the ultimate protection and the ultimate trap. I would be his forever, but I would also have the power to protect Lily from within the system. I said yes. The process was swift and silent. Papers were signed in Vale's office. The board faction reacted exactly as predicted. A week after the guardianship was filed, a tabloid published a salacious story. "Billionaire's new daughter, from barista to heiress in 6 months." It painted me as a cunning manipulator, exploiting a grieving old man and a vulnerable child. They used my past, my dead parents, my debt, as evidence of my predatory nature. But Thorne was ready. His PR machine swung into action, releasing selected images of Lily and me laughing together in the park, a narrative of serendipitous kindness and earned trust. He gave one interview stating, "Clara showed my granddaughter compassion when she needed it most. In my family, we reward loyalty, not punish it." The public, fascinated by the modern-day Cinderella story, largely sided with us. The board's next move was more direct. Robert, emboldened, confronted me at the country estate. "You think a piece of paper makes you one of us? You're a shield. Dad's using you to draw fire while he secures the money. When this is over, you'll be discarded." Elena was colder. "Congratulations, you've officially become a hostage." But I had a weapon now, legitimacy. I started attending family trust meetings with Thorne. I listened. I learned the names of the hostile board members. With Vale's quiet guidance, I began to understand the levers of power, the charitable foundations, the media holdings, the political donations. The final battle was over Lily herself. The board faction filed a motion in family court, citing the toxic and unstable influence of the tabloid controversy, requesting a review of Lily's custodial environment, subtly suggesting Elena might be a more stable guardian under board guidance. They were trying to take Lily from Thorne, using me as the excuse. That was the line. Thorne's winter eyes turned to ice. He unleashed his full power. Within 48 hours, 2 leading hostile board members resigned abruptly, citing personal reasons. Their companies suddenly faced unexpected regulatory hurdles. A third was revealed to have been conducting secret merger talks in violation of his fiduciary duty. The house of cards collapsed. The message was clear. Thorn would burn his own empire to the ground before he let them touch his granddaughter, or me. The silence after the victory was profound. The attack ceased. Robert was packed off to manage a remote division in Asia. Elinor became frostily polite, recognizing the new balance of power. I stood on the terrace of the glass house with Thorn, looking at the secured city. "It's over," I asked. "For now," he said. "You stood when tested. The asset has become an ally." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "The guest suite is yours whenever you wish. You are home, Clara." I moved in the next week. Not into a guest suite, but into a small, sun-filled apartment over the garage, independent but connected. I continued my studies in child psychology. Lily came to my door every afternoon after school. Our bond was unbreakable, forged in a real storm. The final surprise came a year later from Arthur Vale. He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a copy of a clause from the family trust, amended and signed by Thorn. It named me, Clara, as Lily's legal guardian and protector within the trust in the event of his incapacitation or death. It superseded even Elinor's claim. He hadn't just given me a home. He had given me the power to ensure Lily's future, to protect her from the very family forces that had tried to use her. The ultimate reward wasn't wealth. It was authority. It was trust. The little girl crying in the rain had led me to a fortress, a war, and a fractured family. I gave her an umbrella. In return, I was given a sword and a shield and a place to finally belong. The kindness was real. The danger was real. And in the end, so was the family I found in the most unlikely of storms. So what is the true price of an umbrella? $5 at a discount store. A moment of instinct in a downpour. For me, it was everything I had and everything I gained. This story isn't just about a chance meeting with a billionaire. It's a map of a hidden world, one where kindness is a commodity, loyalty is a weapon, and family is the ultimate fortress. We're drawn to these narratives, the homeless inheriting millions, the maid discovering royal blood, because they tap into a deep human hope, that goodness is rewarded, that our smallest actions matter in a vast, indifferent universe. Psychologists confirm this appeal is powerful, very strong even in adults. These fantasies aren't just escape. They're explorations of our own values, mirrors held up to our desires for recognition and security. My reality was messier than the fairy tale. I wasn't swept off my feet by a prince. I was enlisted by a king into a silent war. The reward wasn't a castle, it was a battlefield commission. I gained a family, but I lost my anonymity. I gained the power to protect a child I love, but I accepted the permanent burden of that world's dangers and secrets. The gilded cage is real, but I learned to wield the key. Alastair Thorn, for all his manipulation and might, is a lonely old man building a legacy to honor a dead wife, using whatever tools he finds, including me. Was I used? Absolutely. But I also made a choice to use the position I was given, to turn a gesture of control into a bond of protection. In the end, the umbrella connected two lonely people, a grieving billionaire and a struggling barista, through the simple, uncomplicated heart of a child. The fortune was never the money. It was Lily. It was belonging. It was finding that in the calculus of power and fear, a small human connection could become the most powerful asset of all. We all wonder what we would do if tested, if a single decision could catapult us into a different life. My story is one answer. It asks you, what is your umbrella? What small, decent thing have you done lately without expecting anything in return? And are you prepared for the storm, beautiful or terrifying, that might follow it? If you found this journey from a rain-soaked street to a glass fortress compelling, I invite you to subscribe. Stay with us as we explore more stories where ordinary lives intersect with extraordinary power and discover the hidden architecture of the worlds that shape our own. Thank you for listening. This has been my story.